Welcome to the What to Play podcast. We are your hosts, Jacob and Lucas. And we understand it's been a couple weeks. Both of us are very busy. But, Lucas, how was the last couple weeks for you?
Yeah, busy, stressful, but we're here. So
Wow. Yeah, exactly. That's the best way you can put it.
yeah,
So, we understand we didn't cover the Super Bowl after. Instead of going down that road, we decided let's talk about the fact that Kyle Shanahan, it never seems like he can get over Atlanta. It just never seems that way. You have a great running back, you have a great offensive line, and yet you choose not to run the football in the third quarter. You have Debo Samuel, you have McCaffrey, you have
Kittle.
talented running back. At some point, you got to figure out how to run the football in the third quarter. It's it's so interesting every time because every time I see Kyle Shanahan coach, there's an excuse that follows behind it. If you've been paying attention to the NBA, you're seeing what happens with Doc Rivers. It's just over again, over again, over again. Well, this happened. Oh, I'm taking a coach job in the middle of a year. This is basically the same thing every time with Shanahan. You get to a point of a game where you play really well, and then you just something it just completely falls. The bottom falls out of it. You can't understand it. The game against Detroit, they got back because they ran the football. They got back in the game against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl in the fourth quarter because they ran the football. Let's not run the football in the third quarter. Let's not get Christian McCaffrey the ball. That's very skeptical on my part, but I can't justify it at all.
Yeah. Another issue that I had was just the fact that George Kittle was a non-factor throughout the entire game.
Yes,
He was such a big part of them getting to the Super Bowl, and just to completely ignore him throughout the entire game, it just made no sense. And I feel like you were saying, like in this, I don't know what the halftime speech, like what was said, what the plan was coming into the second half, but they came out with nothing, and it was just three and out, three and out, three and out, and they had so many chances to extend their lead when they had it, and they just kept giving the Chiefs chances, and at a certain point, they're just going to take advantage, which is exactly what happened. So, yeah, no, it was not Kyle Shanahan's greatest performance by any stretch of the matter.
if you look at the when go back. Your team, the Patriots, were in the Super Bowl against the Falcons. Kyle Shanahan was the coordinator. What did he only have to do in that game in the second half? What did he
Milk
have
the
to do?
clock, run the
Milk the
ball.
clock, run the ball. That's all he has to do. What did they do? Threw on every down and it allowed Tom Brady to come back in the game. In a previous Super Bowl against the Chiefs, what did they have to do? Run the football. Just run it. But no, we can't do that. Jimmy Garoppolo has to look like the hero because he only ran the ball. They only threw the ball, remember, in the championship game 9 times. And yet they said, no, we're not going to run it. Same thing here. Third quarter, we're not running the football. Hello? Think of it this way, Lucas. Go back into the game against Atlanta. If you guys are down, you're in the fourth quarter with 2 minutes to go, and either Josh McDaniels or Bill Belichick decide, you know what? Let's not let Tom throw the football. Let's just not let it happen. You would obviously be upset because that's your greatest player, and you're not letting him get the ball.
Mm, yep.
That's the same thing here. And I don't. I think Brock Purdy's a good quarterback, but at some point you have to realize he's not going to be Joe Montana. So let's let him Just hand the ball off, control the game, and work that way. That's not terrible.
Yeah, at this point in his career, he kind of reminds me of, unless he wins the big game, kind of reminds me of like a Marty Schottenheimer, like someone that you'd want as your head coach, but I mean, never won the big game. And I don't know if Kyle won't. I know that 49ers fans are upset with him, and especially with the decision to fire Steve Wilkes is kind of making him the scapegoat, almost like he's the one to blame for not winning the Super Bowl. And I mean, Steve Wilkes wasn't their like normal defensive coordinator hire. If you look back at past DCs that they had, Kyle's reason was that what Steve wanted to run was just not wasn't at all like what the 49ers system was. So that which makes sense, and you could see that in certain games. Um, it just differed in opinion, but and of course the 49ers system is great because I mean all the DCs that have been on that team that have become head coaches. Um, so it's not I don't necessarily hate the decision as much as other people do. And I think Steve Wilkes is a good coach, just on the wrong team. But I think Kyle Shanahan being on like the hot seat or anything like that is ridiculous. I mean, I think a lot of franchises would kill to have the success that Shanahan's had with the 49ers. Um, and I don't know. I just feel like it's first world problems. Like you've made the Super Bowl so many times and you've gotten close. And I mean, you're facing the Chiefs, who are a dynasty. So it's not like you're facing, a team that just like struggled and somehow got to the Super Bowl. Like you're facing a very good team every time. So I think it's ridiculous to picture him on the hot seat. Like if Shanahan became a free agent head coach, I would fire Gerard Mayo, hire Shanahan just because of how good Shanahan is. Not no knock on Mayo. It's just Shanahan's a great coach. So I think that um, talking point is ridiculous.
I too think I don't think Kyle Shanahan's on the hot seat, but I do think we have to question some play calling in spots. I think there is a lot of that, and there is you can pick apart any great coach or any coach game plan all the time, but we blame like for an example, this Steve Wilkes hire. I didn't understand it because it's not like Steve. What did you want his defense to do? They were gassed. You put him on the field 3 quarters. They did not allow Mahomes to run the football at all. Anytime he ran out of the pocket, which he does a lot, they kept him inside as much as they could. They turned him back every chance they could. They never gave him the outside lane at all. What do you want the guy to do? What do you want Nick Bosa or Eric Armstead, who had a hell of a game, I add? Eric Armstead did. He was all over the place. Nick Bosa was running down like he was like it was like pop one of football. He's running all over the place. And it's like and Chase Young, I mean, my gosh, was that Chase Young's best game as a pro? Like that was unrealistic. Like what is he was taking Trent Williams like when they played Washington not that long ago, he was losing that battle. Now he's going against Donovan Smith, who's not a he's I mean, yes, he'll grab you, but he's a good tackle, and he was taking him to the woodshed. Like he was beating him, whether it was just a sack or forcing Mahomes out of the pocket. But I don't understand the Steve Wilkes fight because, and I understand it was not their typical DC. The Niners for so long have hired, especially with Kyle Shanahan, hired internally. They move a linebackers coach, defensive line coach, Robert Sala, D'Amico Ryan. They do that a lot. Steve Wilkes was an outside hire. But I said when it happened, I said, oh my gosh, they just got better. Steve Wilkes is going to be great for them. And from what I've heard, they've said, uh, from what I've heard, this was the 49ers play-by-play man who's saying how when they hired Steve Wilkes, they wanted him to learn their system. of defense, and then he could sprinkle in what he could do. So I do sense that there was frustration. Oh, don't do this, don't do that. I mean, be honest. They weren't beating you when you weren't blitzing. They just weren't. You had them under wrap. But you go back. There's two plays you could probably say, okay, they got beat on that play in the whole game. But maybe two plays in the overtime period, which were they blitzed on 3rd and 15 or whatever it was, and then they blitzed on 3rd and 7. Other than that, they really didn't get beat. They only got beat when they blitzed. The 4th and 1 they blitz. The 3rd and 15 they blitz. The 3rd and 7 they blitz. Other than that, they really didn't get beat. They were very, very stout as a defense, but they're so tired because you put them on the field for like 20 minutes for each quarter or each half. You put them on the field 20 minutes. What did you expect? These are big guys. But I will say this: I enjoyed the game.
Yeah.
The fact that it was not high scoring, it was down to the minute. Everyone was showing that they're a great defensive team. I mean, Spagnuolo did a heck of a job all year with that team. He made Trent McDuffie a great corner in 2 years. That's impressive. So you gotta give props to both those guys because I loved that the way they played. Just it was the 49ers weren't able to hang on.
Yeah, no, it definitely was an entertaining Super Bowl, and also L'Jarius Sneed on the Chiefs. Definitely one of the best corners in the league, especially after this season. He's locked down, so he was impressive, and he was a big part of the Chiefs defense all year. We're gonna talk about Chris Jones off free agency, and especially if he leaves. He said he wouldn't in the Super Bowl parade. I know, but you know, um, you never know. Things happen. So even if they lose Chris Jones, I mean, having, like you said, McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed is still huge. So their secondary is still going to be locked down.
I think this was Spagnuolo's best coaching job the last 2 years. Because remember, last year they had so many injuries at corner. They had to play young guys. And now all of a sudden, those young guys have become really good. You took a chance. It worked. There you go. That's what you got to do at times. You got to say, okay, we're not taking you out because we don't have anybody else. So here we go. And it worked. And now you're in this position and it worked great. That's a great coaching job. Um, I want to talk about this. First off, the coach of the year. I thought it should have been D'Amico Ryan. You take a team that won 3 games and brought them into won a playoff game, go head to head with Baltimore, and for 2 quarters kept them in the game. That to me that's a great coach. But I don't disagree with Kevin Stefanski. You win a game with 4 different quarterbacks. I mean, let's go through the list: Deshaun Watson, Dorian Thompson Robinson, um, P.J. Walker, Joe Flacco. They got him off the couch, and it worked. That was a great coaching job. You cannot deny that. But I just would have given it to D'Amico Ryan. But I was not upset with the pick.
Yeah, it surprised me when I saw it, but I think because everyone was expecting D'Amico Ryans, but yeah, when you think about what Stefanski did for the Browns, it was it was a good decision.
Quickly into the Hall of Fame stuff. Dwight Freeney got in. Devin Hester, finally, probably the greatest returner in history, got in.
Yep.
Andre Johnson, a little skeptical about that one, just a little bit. Julius Peppers got in. Patrick Willis, who I've said should be in,
Yep.
he and Ray Lewis were the two guys, even though Patrick didn't play a long time, that you were like, I don't want to cross the middle. Why hit that guy? Uh, Randy Grandshaw, who played with the Orange Crush defense. But this is the one I really liked. Steve McMichael. And I've advocated for Steve McMichael to get in the Hall of Fame because Steve, part of the '85 Bears, that was probably the greatest defense to ever play. And the way that they played, maybe you want to say greatest blitzing defense, you go either way, but it's still a great defense. Um, but I'm part of the mindset of you have these great players. Like the Hall of Fame system to me is a joke in every sport. It's a joke. Why do we make rules for how many people can go in? It doesn't make sense to me. We have rules of only so many people per team, only so many people in general. It makes no sense. Let's do it when these guys are alive and well. Steve McMichael has ALS and he's fighting his tail off. He was just in the hospital this past week and the last 6 months. He's been in the hospital a couple times. He had pneumonia. He had double pneumonia. He had an infection. He was going, and this guy just keeps on fighting. He just keeps on going, which is impressive. But he should have already been in. There shouldn't be rules to how many people we allow in. Like in the baseball, there's times they don't even let anyone in baseball. And in the NBA, it's the same thing. It just doesn't make sense. There shouldn't be rules for this. It just should be you are a great player. You know what? We'll induct 8 people this year, or we'll induct 12 people this year, or maybe we'll only induct 4 people. Doesn't matter how many we induct. We should just get them in when they're alive. That's my point.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Um, every Hall of Fame system is awful. You wish you could. I wish there was people that we could take out and replace with people that probably won't get in, even though they should get in. It's a joke of a system, but it is, like you said, it's nice and it should be done to um, respect and glorify those people while they're alive, instead of having their family come up and everything like that. So you want to give them that moment because that's a big moment. You want to give that to them while they're still alive and well. So it would be nice.
Exactly. Like the Pete Rozelle Award, which is given to executives and people in broadcasting, that allows them into the Hall of Fame because as a broadcaster or as people in the Hall of Fame, you don't get in as you get into the Broadcasting Hall of Fame or you get into the Executive Hall of Fame, but never the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Well, this year it was Fred Gardelli. Fred Gardelli has worked for NBC for over 30 years and well deserved. I'm not. Fred Gardelli's work is some of the reason why NBC's where they are today. But Brent Musburger is 84 years old. We would not have the NFL Today shows without Brent Musburger. Is he the most liked guy? No. But should we have him? Absolutely. He he was at all these games. He's just forgotten more football than I'll ever know, and that probably anyone will ever know, because he was there. Yet we chose, nah, I'm not gonna do that. He's not liked. This is like the To thing. You look at all To's stats, and you're like, this guy's got to be in the Hall of Fame. Why is he not in? Well, he wasn't like that off the field, and it's like, who cares? Like, he might not be the nicest person, or you might not like him, but on the field, it's undeniable. But Musburger, you may not like him, but what he did was undeniable, and it's where the world is today for these talk shows in the NFL.
Mm, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not a popularity contest. It's what have you done for the sport. So if you've done something revolutionary like the Today Show, that should be uh, awarded.
exactly. So this was some shocking news over the last, I don't know, week and a half. Let's first start with this. The salary cap for 2024 has been announced. Last year it was 228 point something million dollars. I would have to check all my notes and stuff. This year it's gone up 200, it's now $255.4 million. And I should have added this. Each team has to add $74 million for retired players, which I really think is necessary. These retired players go broke either because they can't fund their lifestyle because they don't adjust because you're giving people money at 20 years old and by 30 years old it's done. It's just it doesn't help the situation. But I do agree with that. I think that's smart. I mean, for it to go up almost $30 million, the salary cap, that just shows how good the sport has done in the last year.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. The NFL is definitely bigger than it's ever been. And even especially this year with the whole Taylor Swift stuff, getting people that would never have watched football to watch football. And maybe a lot of them liked it and will watch again next year. That's huge for the NFL. So, I mean, the rich keep getting richer, I guess.
But that's the way it works. But I want to ask you two questions. First of all, what did you think about the overtime rules in the Super Bowl? Did you like this? Because this was the new time. Like this is the effect of the Chiefs Bills game of a couple years ago. Allen does not get on the field, and now that's a whole throwing
Yeah.
it up in the air. We don't know what to do.
It, is it correct that the overtime rules in the playoffs are different than the regular season?
Yes, which I don't understand. I just don't.
Yeah, same.
To me, it's either change the regular season overtime or keep it the same. Why do one and then do another? Confuse these players and coaches. Because these players are not focused on, oh, the overtime rules changed. Oh, they're not focused on that. They're focused on winning the game. The
Yeah.
coaches are in the moment.
And
We shouldn't have to
I think
question it.
above that, it confuses the fans. I mean, having different overtime rules for different, depending what month the game is played is confusing. Um, it's fine. I didn't hate the overtime rules in the before the Chiefs the Chiefs Buffalo game and before that. I thought it made defenses have to step up. And I get that. I mean, at that point in overtime, they're probably juiced, but um, still, I mean, I think defense. I think as the NFL continues to grow, I think defense and special teams are becoming less and less important, and it's all about offenses. And I think that's what these overtime rules kind of imply. But they're fine. I wish it was just consistent with like the season and the postseason.
That was my point. I was like, either change the rules so we don't have ties in the regular season because ties are boring. There's just nothing there. I mean, I get like if the game's 3-3 and we're in overtime, like I get it, but it's like to me, like if you're gonna say, okay, we're gonna give both sides a chance, all right, do that, and if it doesn't work, okay, fine, but you can't say, okay, we're gonna do this, and then in the postseason, it's gonna change and confuse these players because there was and again another excuse. Well, we didn't know the overtime rules. That's why we took the ball first. To me, it wasn't a matter of who took the ball first. It was a matter of score a touchdown on the drive. That's the goal. And ultimately, San Francisco didn't do that. They kicked a field goal, and Kansas City was able to score a touchdown. That's it. Because if they would have scored a touchdown, we would have said, "Oh," and the Chiefs didn't. We're going to say, "Oh my gosh, that's the meta." But since it didn't happen, we're like, "Oh my gosh, what were they thinking?"
Hmm. Yeah. I do understand the strategy of taking it second because you kind of like know like okay well I gotta they scored a touchdown So a field goal is not an option. So you have that extra down every play rather than like if the Niners knew that the Chiefs scored a touchdown because they did, um, they could have went for it on fourth down. So that's the strategy there, which makes sense. And yeah, no, it's just confusing all around.
Well, and if you think about it, go back to that third down play that the 49ers had. They threw it. Like, you're near the goal line. You have Christian McCaffrey. Why are you throwing it? You're like inside the 15-yard line. You have Christian McCaffrey. So even if it's a 4th and 1 instead of a 4th and whatever it was, 4, like, why does that matter?
Hmm.
Like, that was just, again, bad play calling on Shanahan's part. But I digress. The second thing I wanted to talk about was if I can remember what I was actually trying to. Oh yeah, the Taylor Swift. No, so I was not offended when Taylor Swift said I'm gonna go and watch football games. I'm not offended by that. That's fine. I didn't like the how many times they panned over. To me, that's a little excessive. Like every time Kelsey caught a ball, they panned over. Didn't see it in the first half of the Super Bowl. Second half, pan over, pan over, pan over. Even if it was just, they said, well, it was only 54 seconds. You panned over 12 times. I think that's good enough. But it doesn't affect the game. So I wasn't against it. But I think what annoyed a lot of people was saying that it was because of the Taylor Swift fans it went up by $30 million. It would have gone up, probably not that much, but it would have gone up. But I don't think
Yeah.
it really should have offended anybody.
No, I think what people's issue was well, it was the panning, but it's the 2 weeks, especially for the Super Bowl of build like on social media where you're seeing like 10 Taylor Swift posts a day. And that is what people are complaining about. It's not, and it wasn't necessarily because we are like, oh, well, we only, like you said, 54 seconds. But that, yes, but it's the social media, I think, that people were really complaining about. You'd see that's all you saw for, especially from the championship game to the Super Bowl, 2 weeks. So I think that's what people are fed up with the most.
Oh, I agree with that. I think it's overkill. It's overkill. But at the same time, it's a magnitude kind of sport. It's all about that. We have people both on both sides that do the same thing. So it's if you look at it from that perspective, you get it. But it's overkill, yes.
Yep.
All right, to move on. This was some shocking news. Jimmy Garoppolo suspended 2 games for performance enhancers. Now, obviously, the jokes all over the internet were he's using it because he's using it because he's an older guy. He's using it because he's losing his hair. Like, obviously, these are jokes, but I'm just trying to figure out did they know about this during the season and said, okay, well, he's not playing anyway, so we'll just do it when he's on another team, or if he is on another team, which I think he will be. But, or is this they just figured it out now? In which case, why was he using it now? But it was a shocker nonetheless.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it was just kind of like one of those things where it's like if Mahomes was using performance enhancers, I'd have been like, whoa. But I mean, the fact that it was Jimmy Garoppolo, it's just kind of like, well, whatever. It's not like you really
Yeah,
did
it was
a whole lot with him. So I don't even know if he won a
exactly.
game when he was using them.
I don't know. I don't know when he was using it.
Right.
Uh, a couple more things. The Bengals decide they are going to franchise tag T. Higgins. They told him on Friday, hey, franchise tagging you. And you say, well, okay, yes, he had a down year. No Joe Burrow for half the year. Um, T. Higgins would have been a very high price free agent. At $21 million, that's a little high for my taste. But I get it. You gotta try to keep him around because what point is this going to change? How long can we keep it the same? And that's what they did. They kept him at $21 million.
Yeah. He would have been probably the most targeted receiver in free agency, even over Mike Evans, if he was available. He could be a number one on any team, almost any team.
Mhm.
Um, and he's the number two on the Bengals just because of Jamar Chase. So I mean, he's probably missing out on some production that he could possibly get on another team. But I mean, as long as he's getting paid, I'm sure he doesn't really care because he's going to get
Yeah,
paid regardless. Like next year, if
exactly.
he's not signed, he's going to get paid.
And I think at this, you have to understand it. I never get offended when a player goes, it's like, I'm gonna go there because I'm gonna make more money. Okay, like I get it. Like it's kind of like I get it because at what point does that train stop moving? You want to get paid as much as you can. It's not like the NBA where you can get 250 million for a max contract. You can't do that. You have to do with the confines. And so this deal, okay, it is what it is. Now, they have until July, I think it's July 16th, to get a deal done. The earlier you do it, the tag process, the earlier you can get into that process. So maybe that's what they were thinking. Um, Moving to the Dolphins, I don't know if you saw the Vic Fangio stuff when Vic
No.
Fangio left. What was supposedly Javon Holland, who's the safety, one of the best safeties in the NFL for the Miami Dolphins, you saw him actually like it, we think it's him. We're not 100% sure. You saw him throwing rocks and kicking rocks. Like you got rid of this guy. Why? Because he's not full of sunshine and rainbows. He's gonna tell you what it is and how it is and what we gotta do. But this is a couple of things that happened here. The Dolphins are releasing Xavier Howard and Emmanuel Ogba as cap casualties. At this point in the year, you have to make decisions. You have to be cap compliant by March 13th at $255 million or lower. And Xavier Howard's contract and Emmanuel Ogba's contract wasn't going to allow him to do it. So they moved on from them. A shocker, but they made that decision.
Yep. Yeah, the Vic Fangio firing was stupid. Like you can blame the defense that he wasn't great down the stretch, but that was because of injuries. That wasn't because of Vic Fangio and his play calling. So I mean, that was just one of those decisions where you know the GM and the coach are trying to keep their job. I mean, they're not going to fire Mike McDaniel, but or at least the GM is trying to keep his job. He's like, okay, well, whose fault was it that we couldn't beat a real team besides the Cowboys this season, and we lost pretty handily in the playoffs? Oh, it was Vic Fangio. Um, yeah, and those two, like Emmanuel Ogba and Xavier Howard, are both two good players. So I mean, I'm sure they'll find homes pretty quickly in free agency.
Yeah. Well, I think Vic Fangio is like what Steve Wilkes is in San Francisco at this moment. Just they're not the guys that are not, hey, we're gonna go and I want to go to your wedding. It's like, no, that's not what they're destined to do. And we're going to talk about that as in a second about what the Cowboys did for their DC. And they did a very similar thing is get an older guy who's a no nonsense guy. Who's he's the guy, let's go. Let's get a guy who's no nonsense because like I feel like the old school coach is leaving. the sport. And that's not a good thing. It's not a terrible thing, but it's like saying, oh, he's not the guy you're going to go want to get a beer with. He's not smiling all the time and, going to want to play with your kids. He wants to just win. And you need those guys to win. Like, what did Bill Belichick provide for the Patriots all those years? You had McDaniels, you had all these other coordinators. What did Belichick provide? He provided a football guy who I'll tell you what it is and what we want to do, but I have coordinators that are going to be willing to be buddy buddy with you. In Miami, it's different. We have a coach that's going to be buddy buddy with you, but we need a coach, a coordinator that's not going to be that way. To me, that's not a negative, but it was taken as such.
Yeah.
And final, the Cowboys, they made a DC hire, Mike Zimmer. And this was the Zimmer hire I thought was the best hire you could have done. I mean, it was not a good class, basically. If we were talking like it's an actual like drafting class of coaches, this was not a great class. It was Mike Zimmer, Rex Ryan, Ron Rivera, Adam Dirty, who was the defensive line coach. Joe Witt left, and there was just not good options. You had the Jets cornerback coach. It was just weird. So it had to be Zimmer. I felt happier with Zimmer because I was like, I don't really want Rex Ryan, who hasn't coached in a decade, hasn't had good coach defense in a decade, and say, Ron Rivera will work. No. We saw what happened. No, I'm good.
Yeah, no.
I just, that's how I felt about it. When I heard they brought in Zimmer, it wasn't like, okay, they're bringing all these great players again. It was, I wanted a coach that was like, no nonsense. I wanted a coach to go and be like, the best way it was described was Dan Quinn, and we said Dan Quinn, McDaniel, those guys you want to go get a beer with. You want to go talk to them. You want to go to the wedding. You want to do dances and all that stuff. But when it comes down to it, you need a drill sergeant to get you where you want to go. This is the military's view for years. Like, you have your parents. Your parents are going to love you. But at some point, you go into the military, you need someone to go and say, let's go. Let's roll. Let's move it. I'm not going to smile. I'm going to be mean. I'm going to be a tyrant at times. But it's to get us where we have to go. And that's this decision. We're going where we have to go.
I think it's a good decision. You need a culture change. You can't hire someone just like Dan Quinn. Um, Dan Quinn found another job, and if Dan Quinn was like, I want to stay, there would have been rumblings of should the Cowboys have let go of Dan Quinn. So,
I
I think the Mike Zimmer hire is a good hire. I think you need a culture change. You don't want Micah Parsons going on his podcast, talking about things. You want strict, no nonsense. Like, don't listen to the media. Um, you need someone like that. And I wouldn't say Mike McCarthy's is a seems like a big strict coach. I'm sure he is, but he's not like a Zimmer, So getting someone
right.
like Mike Zimmer in that locker room is probably healthy for the whole locker room as a whole.
I think if you look at the defense for Zimmer before we just get off this topic entirely, you look at the Cowboy defense, how it's structured. They're terrible against the run. They've always been bad with Dan Quinn. They've been bad. Their linebackers were small because they had no linebackers. You had 6 defensive backs all the time. You were not going to win games that way. And yes, you did things that got better, but your defense down the stretch was horrible. And it was not like the Miami Dolphins thing, where you could say injuries because it was obvious how injured they were. You lose Jalen Phillips, you lose Van Ginkel, you lose these guys. You're playing Melvin Ingram, Jason Pierre-Paul, and you practically grabbed anyone that was still a player and said, "Okay, let's go." The Cowboys, that was not the same thing. You have all these guys, and they're unable to do anything. And I understand, yes, there was injuries, yes, there was factors, and yes, there was bad coaching. At some point, you just gotta say, "We're the players. Let's go. Who cares? Let's go." And that all stems from that department. And so bringing in Zimmer, I'm not saying, okay, they're gonna go get Daniil Hunter, they're gonna go get Max Crosby, they're gonna do this, they're gonna do that. No, they're gonna go and say, we may get a player, we may get two players. We may get a really good player, we may get a great player. But we need to do the things because the mindset, and we've talked about this before, where, and this is how I got my start in announcing. I worked, I was doing the high school basketball games for the boys and girls. And the boys were just better than the girls. That's just the way it was at the time. But what I noticed, and just from a sideline perspective, if the if there was a team down 2, 3, 4 points, which is like not that much in basketball, everyone's like they're like, oh my gosh, we're down 100. I'm like, you're down 2 baskets. You're good. Just dial it in. Let's go. Which I feel like the Cowboys are the same way. They give up a touchdown or they give up 2 touchdowns. They're like, oh my gosh, we're down. We're not going to win this game. When anyone else, the bringing in Zimmer, that's not going to happen, which I think is necessary as well. And to bring up the final point for the franchise tag stuff, like we said this off air, probably a lot less franchise tags in a long time. Mike Evans and Chris Jones aren't going to get franchise tags. They're just too expensive. The way their contract was set up the final year, too expensive. Mike Evans would get $28 million on a franchise tag. He would become one of the highest paid wide receivers as a franchise tag player
Mm.
for because how his contract was structured. What he would have been making 21, now he's going to make 28. Chris Jones would be the highest paid defensive lineman in the league at $32 million. It's just not going to happen. But I also think we got to think. Yes, you're a good defensive player. I think you guys are going to get what they're going to get. They're going to want an A+ contract. That's what they all want. Get these contracts. They're not going to want a B+ contract to say, oh, we want to keep this group together. No. Get it
Yeah.
when you can.
Yeah, and especially Chris Jones. He's going for that money. He signed the 1 year, the team friendly deal this year. He's going for that money. If the Chiefs won't give it to him, he will go somewhere else.
Exactly. Like the Chris Jones deal, I think if it was his franchise tag, if I remember correctly, it would have been 27 million. But because of how his contract was structured with heavy incentives, his franchise tag would be 32.8 million. You're not going to pay a 33-year-old $32.8 million. I don't
Yeah.
care how good you are. You could be Reggie White. You're not doing that. It just doesn't make sense. At a cheaper deal, absolutely. But 32 for 1 year, not likely.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that is the end of the Waterpie podcast, powered by StreamYard, where we thank you for joining us. And when free agency starts, it's really
We'll
when
cover
this
that.
kicks into high gear, especially the first week of free agency, and it's go time. But we
Yep.
thank you. I'm Jacob and Lucas, and we will see you next time on the Waterpie podcast. Peace.